Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all having a great day today. Today we have Frankie Norton, who is our East consultant, talking about Seamless Summer for this summer 2022. A couple of housekeeping things about our upcoming meetings and trainings. The statewide update call that was scheduled for this Thursday has been canceled. We do not have a training on the schedule next Tuesday, so our next training will be on March 29th, and it will be on civil rights, and it will actually be an hour and a half long. So we just wanted to let you know so that you could prepare for that. If you have questions today, please send those to all panelists. I also want to make a note that we will also be talking about summer feeding at the regional meetings so that we can have more discussion based in smaller groups over the same content, because we know that there are a lot of moving pieces coming up for operating this summer. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Frankie.
All right, thanks, Randa. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right, great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, as Randa said, we're going to be talking about the Seamless Summer option for summer of 2022. And again, just as a preface, we will talk about this same presentation and go into greater detail at our regional meetings. So don't feel like you have to get it now or you missed it. We're going to cover it in detail again. Okay. So in Tennessee, we want to set all students on a path for success, and we do that through these three pillars: academics, educators, and student readiness. And school nutrition lives within the student readiness pillar. And as you all know, our mission statement is to develop extraordinary nutrition professionals and provide strategies to increase consumption of healthy school meals. So our objectives for today's training are: we want this presentation to be a tool that you can use for your summer 22 operations. We'll identify the types of site operations, site eligibilities, and understand the application process. We'll understand the differences between operations before and after June 30th of 22. All right, so getting into it, this section provides an overview of the normal SSO operations, and we're going to make note of areas that are covered by a COVID waiver that lasts until June 30th. So there are currently two federally funded summer feeding programs, One is the National School Lunch Program Seamless Summer Option, for which only schools can participate in. It's operated, as you know, through the Department of Education, and it will be the focus of today's training. The other federally funded summer feeding program is the Summer Food Service Program, which is operated through the Department of Human Services, and that is not the focus of this training. That's a whole different division. A fun fact: in summer of 2021, the Seamless Summer Operation programs in Tennessee served approximately 5.75 million meals. That's quite an accomplishment. You all should be very proud. So in general, how does it work? This slide provides a very high-level look at the roles and responsibilities of those involved in the summer feeding program. Basically, the state agency recruits and trains sponsors, provides monitoring, technical assistance, and then processes and distributes the claims for reimbursement. Sponsors, which is you all, recruit and you train sites, provide monitoring and technical assistance for them. Then you report and claim meal counts for reimbursement. And additionally, sponsors must conduct outreach to families in the community. And then at the site level, they feed and supervise the children, they record accurate meal counts, and they also conduct community outreach. So keep in mind, this slide represents normal SSO requirements, and I know it's been a very long time since we've seen normal with Seamless Summer. In fact, many of you may have never operated Seamless Summer under what we call normal rules. So again, we're going to try to cover those with the caveats of what's allowed with waivers through June 30th. So in general, SSO can only be operated May through September when school is not in session. SFAs who participate in the National School Lunch or Breakfast programs can apply to be a sponsor and sponsor non-school feeding sites, and they feed children 18 and under. The reimbursement rates for the meals are usually the National School Lunch and Breakfast rates, and right now they're not. They're the higher summer food service rates, but that will end on June the 30th. So if you are operating SSO beyond June the 30th, those rates will transition to the school year 22-23 National School Lunch and Breakfast rates. And that's important if you are going to operate beyond the June 30th for budgetary purposes, so you'll know to adjust those rates. Also, in general, the meal pattern and other rules to be followed for Seamless Summer are those of the National School Lunch and Breakfast programs, which is why we call it Seamless Summer. Those operational details are seamless. There's no new meal pattern or rules to learn typically. Under normal SSO, pre-COVID, no waivers. The regular NSLP, SVP meal pattern must be followed. Currently, there is a meal pattern waiver for the vegetable subgroups and for the sodium limits that you can use until June the 30th of 22. Now, if you already have that, that's the same waiver, and I think I'll say this again later in the presentation, but I'll go ahead and address it now. The waivers that we refer to are the same waivers that existed this entire school year. They're nothing new, just for summer. If you already have a meal pattern waiver, or later on we'll talk about a parent pickup waiver, if you already have those approved, you do not need to submit new ones to Sandy for approval. If you don't have them or you're not sure, you can always reach out to your consultant to ask for assistance in determining if you've already got one approved. On the screen, you'll see that, you still must keep accurate production records, still have to meet the minimum serving amounts. There's the calorie, fat, sodium limitations that we have. You must have a HACCP plan and follow it, and only meals served can be claimed for reimbursement. By now, you have probably heard about or read about the transitional standards for milk, whole grains, and sodium that go into effect on July 1st of 2022. So that new rule allows program operators to offer flavored 1% low-fat milk for students in grades K through 12, and also for sale as a competitive beverage. That's really good news. They also allow program operators to use the sodium target 1 as the sodium limits for lunch and breakfast during school year 22 and 23. Then beginning school year 23-24, there is something called a sodium target 1A that becomes effective. And we'll talk about that later when it's relevant, but essentially it's a 10% decrease from the target 1 that you're going to be able to operate this coming school year. The transitional standards also require operators to provide at least 80% of the weekly grains in the lunch and breakfast programs to be whole grain rich. So without this transitional rule, the requirement would be that 100% of the weekly grains would have to be whole grain rich. But the transitional rule allows it to be only 80% if you want it. Of course, you can always do 100 if you want to, but you have to do 80 at a minimum. So now we're going to dig into what it actually means to operate SSO. So we're encouraging SFAs to plan SSO operations of a more traditional model for the entire summer while still supporting the TDOE summer learning camps that are required. How you plan your summer operations is probably going to depend on if you're going to operate beyond June the 30th or not. Again, your consultant is your best resource for assisting you with this planning and how these rules affect you. You're not in this alone. Make sure you reach out to your consultant. So again, we're saying that we think it'd be easiest for everybody if you move to a more traditional operating model, although the waivers are available, and we'll talk about those in a minute, through June the 30th. You do have to implement those new transitional standards for milk, whole grains, and sodium beginning July 1st. A goal of operating SSO is to provide summer meals for children 18 and under. We want to support the TDOE learning camps, and we want, obviously, to provide nutritious meals. This slide lists all of the waivers that are available and ending on June the 30th. So they're available until and ending on June the 30th. The school year 21-22 SSO operation and area eligibility ends. The summer food service reimbursement rates end. The non-congregate meal service option ends. The mealtime requirements waiver ends. Parent pickup ends. Meal flexibility, or the meal pattern flexibility, and the fiscal action flexibility. All of those end on June the 30th. So when you're planning for your summer operations, you're going to plan much the same way as you've been doing it since the beginning of the pandemic. You're going to be flexible, right, because you've had to be. You're going to think about messaging. You're going to think about how you're going to inform the public and your staff that even though we have these flexibilities and these waivers, the intent is for there to be one meal per meal program per child per day. You also have to think about the timeline. If you plan on operating beyond June the 30th, you've really got to think about how are you going to inform and transition both the public and your staff. How are they going to deal with those program changes because they are drastic come July the 1st. You also need to think about, something that I know has been on the forefront of your mind this whole time, staffing availability. It's hard to get staff to work through the school year. Do you really have staff to support a full-blown summer program? Can you make that work? Do you have adequate supply chain, supplies for the summer? Do you have plenty of food and or containers to support a summer program? And again, I know these are things you've already been thinking about through the whole school year, but they also come into play for summer feeding also. So if you do choose to implement the waivers through June the 30th, there are varying degrees in which that can be done. And the next couple of slides show some of those options. So the least like implementation would be this first option you see here, overlapping meal times only. You may choose to only use that waiver. Just because there's several waivers available doesn't mean you have to use every waiver to its fullest extent. You can partially implement waivers or implement some waivers without others. And we're going to show you some examples. It's not all of the examples of possibly what could happen. These are just some things you can think about. So the first example is overlapping meal times only. For example, you might serve one breakfast and one lunch together at the same time to be consumed on site by the child. In that case, you're using the mealtime waiver. Or you might do an overlapping meal times with a non-congregate waiver, and an example of that might be you might serve one breakfast and one lunch together and allow them to be consumed off-site with the child present. Another scenario might be to serve multiple days of meals with the child presence required. So this scenario would include the use of a mealtime and non-congregate waivers, but it would still require the child to be present to receive the meals. An example of this might look like serving 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches on Monday and 2 breakfasts and 2 lunches on Thursday, requiring the child to be present. So you'd be using the non-congregate, but not the parent pickup in this case. The last example is kind of the least restrictive of all of them, and it's the one that would be the most difficult to try to maintain some program integrity, because in this last example, you might use multiple days of meals allowing parent pickup without the child present. So an example of this would be serving multiple breakfasts and lunches without requiring the child to be present. Again, the waivers are there, you can do it, but it's just more difficult to try to maintain the intent and the spirit of using the waivers and what the USDA means with, 1 meal per child per program per day. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the actual SSO application process in TMAC. So school nutrition supervisors, we need you to review your SSO site applications and TMAC to make sure each site is represented correctly. And so when you're doing that, you're going to want to check on the end dates of your site applications. So if you have site applications or sites that are not going to operate beyond the end of your academic calendar, you're going to make sure that the end date reflects that in that site application. If you are going to operate beyond the academic calendar, you want to make sure that the site lines up with what it's going to be. For instance, it might have been a closed site through the academic calendar year, but it might going to be operate as an open site during your summer feeding. So we need to make sure that those site types line up also. And for any sites that you're going to operate beyond June the 30th, it's really important to look at everything on that site app, because things like, especially for things like the area eligibility and how that site qualifies, and we'll go into site qualifications here in a minute, but the area eligibility waiver ends June the 30th, and so you may currently be operating a site in a location that would not qualify without the waiver. It's very important, if you plan on operating that site beyond June the 30th, that you know for a fact that it will qualify without the waiver before you plan that. So again, you're not in this alone. It's a lot of information. It's very confusing. Reach out to your regional consultant and ask them for assistance when you're planning these kind of special off situations. They can help you. This is just a screenshot of what part of the summer site application looks like. And essentially, it just says that the Seamless Summer contact is the person at the SFA level who is the contact for the program. And the organizational liaison is the person at the site level if it's different from the Seamless Summer contact. It can also be the site supervisor or the liaison between the site organization and the SFA. So there's different types of SSO site eligibility, and this slide shows each type that's available. SSO eligibility is determined the same way that it is for the summer food service program, for those of you who are familiar with that type of determination. Essentially, you can have an open site, and that's what we really recommend. That's the goal. That's what the USDA really has in mind when they think about summer feeding, because the goal is to serve as many children in your community as possible, right? So an open site area eligibility is determined from the school data or census block data. You can operate a closed enrolled site under certain circumstances. That eligibility must be determined through the approval of applications and not through area eligibility. And so to do that, at least 50% of the enrolled children at that site must be approved for free or reduced meals. Now, don't get that confused with this past school year or the past couple of school years. We've said enrollment at a site could be the entire student body, but that's not the case for summer. During real summer, that was all because of COVID and waivers, right? During real summer, at least, so like for your instance, your summer learning camps, these might be some instances where you might want to operate a closed enrolled site at a summer learning camp. And so at least 50% of those students enrolled in that summer learning camp would have to qualify for free or reduced meals. You'll also see on here camp and migrant site determinations. Do not confuse camp on any of these slides with the TDOE summer learning camps. Those do not meet the USDA definition of a summer learning, of a camp. So on these two slides that you're going to see, this slide and the following slide, camp does not equal TDOE summer learning camp. And we have a slide to address the TDOE summer learning camps coming up. So this shows the SSO site types and reimbursement for each type. So again, open and restricted open are basically the same thing. Restricted open just means that you might restrict the attendance for safety or security or control purposes. But open sites, meals are served on a first-come, first-served basis. It serves all children 18 and under. Meals are reimbursed at the school breakfast or National School Lunch Program rates. and the site must be area eligible. Closed enrolled sites serve only an identified group of children who are 18 through age 18, who are participating in a specific group activity, and summer school is not typically a closed enrolled site. Again, our summer learning camps aren't really being classified as summer school or camps. I know it's very confusing. They can be a closed enrolled site or they can be an open site. This is a screenshot of the TMAC SSO site application, and we're going to talk about some of these questions here in just a minute. As you can see, you have to indicate the type of site in question 14, an open site, a restricted open, a closed enrolled, and then there is a section down there in 14 also that starts, and you can't see all of it, but it's the qualified by. And we'll kind of go into those in just a moment. So open sites are encouraged for summer 2022 operations. Meals must be made available to all children age 18 and under in the community. So open sites can serve summer learning camps and a public feeding from the same location. You can do both from the same site. Open sites can be located in a school or non-school site. Allowing non-congregate or parent pickup meals requires an approved 2122 parent pickup flexibility form. Again, if you don't know if you have one, you can reach out to your consultant and they can help you find it, or you can request one if you don't have one from Sandy by clicking in this link when you get the, when we send out the slide deck, you can click on that link and request one from Sandy. This slide is essentially the same thing. It just makes note that the restricted open sites allow the SFA to restrict or limit attendance due to security, safety, or control, but you must list the reason in that program application as to why you're restricting your site to a restricted open status. Summer 2022 closed enrolled sites. So this is essentially without waivers. You know, again, I'm presenting this as it will be without waivers, but we do have waivers through June the 30th that will allow you to operate a little bit differently. But SFAs can choose to utilize closed enrolled sites to feed students who are enrolled in a summer program. This can include the TDOE required summer learning camps. If you're operating a closed enrolled site, it can be located at a school or non-school site. The SFA can only receive reimbursement for meals served to children who are enrolled in that program. And to qualify a closed enrolled site, 50% of the children who are enrolled in that summer program must be eligible for free or reduced price meals. But again, there is a waiver in place that kind of removes that restriction, and a closed enrolled site can be established at any location through June the 30th. If you're going to serve beyond June the 30th, we've got to make sure those sites are at an eligible location. So this is a slide that deals specifically with the summer learning camps. So again, they do not meet the USDA definition of a camp for site eligibility purposes, but they can operate as an open, a restricted open, or a closed enrolled site. The area eligibility waiver can be used to establish an SSO site in locations that do not qualify based on the site or the census data. This option should only be used if the site cannot qualify through normal means, because the waiver is only good through June the 30th. So it's important to consider how a site will qualify when planning its location. The SSO site application 14 requires qualified by information. And although we currently have an area eligibility waiver that can be used if necessary, all sites that qualify by one of the following means must list that qualifying information instead of using the waiver. So if a site, an open, restricted open, or closed enrolled site qualifies using the free or reduced school data of the site or a site within the attendance area or the census data of the site, they need to use that. We don't want you just using the waiver because you're not really sure how else it qualifies, or that's the quickest way to get the application done. Because if you do that, we don't have accurate data on how the waiver is being utilized. And also, if you need to operate that site beyond June the 30th, if you're using the waiver, you won't be able to do that. So if you have a site that can qualify by regular means, we need to make sure we get that reflected properly on the site application. And again, your consultant can help you with that. Again, just kind of driving that point home that the area eligibility waiver expires on June the 30th. Sites that do not meet the area eligibility criteria are not authorized to operate as of July 1st. And if a non-eligible site continues to operate, meals at that site will not be considered reimbursable. And so, again, the ways that a site can qualify on its own is if a site is located in the attendance area of a school with 50% free or reduced rate, it can be established using the following data. So it can use the 1920 free or reduced data or most recent if it's available and beneficial. It can use the site, individual site ISP for a CEP school, or it can use census map area eligibility. Speaking of the census map, here is the updated link for the updated map. So sites that don't qualify for area eligibility using the school data might use census data, and you can use the link there to click on it, and it brings up the area eligibility map. You enter the address of the site you want to put it in, and if it's in a pink area, it qualifies. If it's in a blue area, it does not, or red. It looks pink on my screen. I guess it would be red. And also there's a link to how to decode the GEO ID for your TMAC application, because there is information from that area eligibility map that you're going to need if you're going to use census data in your TMAC application or your site application. So again, if you need help with that, don't hesitate to call your consultant and they can help walk you through that. There are some further site eligibility possibilities. SFAs can sponsor one of these other types of sites with state agency approval. So you might be an SFA who wants to sponsor a site outside of your district. That happens sometimes. You know, mobile feeding sites, non-school sites operated by nonprofit or for-profit. So there's other circumstances than just the typical ones we see that are possible. I don't want to go into all those details because it's confusing and it really only applies to a few locations. But again, if you're one of those districts that wants to do something a little outside the norm, call your consultant. This is a screenshot from the SSO site application. We're going to kind of go into a little bit more about that here in a minute. Question 15 specifically asks for the targeted, what is the age group, and we want you to enter the targeted age for the site. So if in the past, if you set up at like a park, perhaps, or a community center, if only younger children were present at the site in the past, you would select the K through 5. Additional food can be provided for older children who attend that site. If you're targeting K through 5 and you have some older kids, you can provide them with additional food. But if you're targeting like a high school summer event, like maybe, I don't know, something that's happening during the summer there, and you're setting up at the high school and you know that's traditionally who's going to come, then you should select the 9 through 12 meal pattern. So again, you want to select the meal pattern that applies to the group you're targeting for your open and restricted open sites. For closed enrolled sites, you're going to select the age or grade group of the kids who are enrolled. So if you are doing a summer learning camp at a K through 5 school, then you would select K through 5. If you're doing a summer learning camp at a 9 through 12 school, then you would select 9 through 12, and you would put the word enrollment in there. That's how you know that. That's your documentation, is your enrollment. So looking into a little bit more detail on the site application, question 16 has several parts to it. And so at an open site, a restricted open, or a closed site, you can only feed a maximum of 2 meals per day, inclusive of snack. So on the screen, you can see the combinations that are allowable. And it's easier just to say what is not allowable, which is lunch and supper. You cannot claim lunch and supper to the same day to the same children. So you can see the red box there highlights where you're going to select the 2 types of meals that you're going to serve. And then also in question 16, you have to enter the meal service time beginning and ending, and you have to do it for each of your programs. So there are red boxes on the screen that kind of highlight where you have to enter the beginning and ending meal service time. Also on question 16, you have to select the days you are going to serve, you plan on serving. And so keep in mind that this information, when we do our SSO reviews, like we have to go back and look at your application to make sure that your operations match your application. That's why it's so important to make sure these site applications are correct, you know, with what your actual summer feeding model is going to be. And also on number 16, you have to enter the maximum number you expect to serve. You can overestimate. You know, I know at the beginning of the pandemic when we started doing this, you all had no way of even beginning to know how many meals you were going to serve because of the wide breadth of which we were doing it. You can overestimate, but try to keep it something in the ballpark. We don't want crazy numbers here. Try to be realistic about your numbers that you're going to estimate per program to be served. Camps and migrant sites, remember, these are not the USDA, the Tennessee Department of Education Summer Learning Camps. These are, think like the 4-H camps, that type of stuff. If you have these sites, you could serve 3 days or 3 meals per child. But again, those are unusual. We don't really have a lot of those. And if you think you do, please reach out to your regional consultant so we can make sure we get that site application and actual service correct. Another screenshot from the TMAC SSO site application. We're going to go into some details about these questions here. Question 19 about offer versus serve. That is always optional for SSO. You just got to consider what works for the model you're going to do. Question 20 is always going to be no right now. The USDA changed that option, so just select no. We don't have an option to select yes right now. Question 21 is about advertising. If you're operating an open, a restricted open, or a migrant site, you must advertise to the public. You must provide advertisement dates and methods, and the advertisement must include the non-discrimination statement. If you're operating a closed site, you will not enter anything. I'm going back to this so you can see there, 21. If you're operating a closed site, you will just leave it blank. You don't have to do anything in question 21 for a closed site. So in summary, the state agency, we recommend transitioning to normal SSO operations to the extent possible prior to June 30th, 2022. However, you do have the option to use the waivers to the full extent if that's what you want to do through June the 30th. We want you to review your SSO sites to ensure they accurately reflect your site operations beyond your academic school year. And on July 1st, 2022, it's very important to remember and understand that all SSO meals must be served at area-eligible open or restricted open sites or at closed enrolled sites where 50% or more of the students are free or reduced eligible. All meals must meet the transitional standards for milk, whole grains, and sodium. All meals must be served at the appropriate meal time, must be served to children 18 and under, and consumed on site. So that was a lot. Brenda, I'm sure we have a bunch of questions in the chat. Before we move on to the survey at the end, let's go ahead and talk about some of the questions in the chat.
So we actually only have one question right now, and that says, do we have the new 22-23 reimbursement rate?
I don't know if those have been published yet, to be honest with you.
I'm pretty sure they haven't. They usually don't publish them until a lot closer to July 1.
I've got a friend telling me no, they have not been published yet. I haven't checked that yet, but I think the answer is no.
But right now, that's the only question that we have.
Okay. Well, listen.
Yes, this PowerPoint will be sent out. That was the next question.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and put up the survey slide. You can use your phone. Like if you open the camera on your phone, on your smartphone, and point it at that black and white box there, it should pull up a link to a survey you can click on. If you don't have that capacity, don't worry about it. The actual link will be sent in the recap email that Randy's going to send out. You've got time to take it. It's not a do it now or never get to do it thing.
Frankie,
so don't worry about that.
I also put that link in the chat. I know some people have been having issues with saving the certificate on their phones, so I went ahead and put that on the chat.
That's nice. Good, good. Yeah, so you can also click on the chat feature and click on that link that Randa put in there.
And we do have some more questions that have come in.
Okay.
So this one says, if we're using SSO and the schools are closed, how do we separate the application to the additional months?
If we're using SSO and the schools are closed. So I'm not exactly sure I understand the question, but so essentially if you have a site application at one of your schools that is in school right now, and that school, we'll just say the last day of your academic school year for that school is on May the 23rd. I have no idea what day of the week that is, but we'll just say it's May the 23rd. And then you're going to start summer feeding at that site on June the 1st. So you would go into that site application and you would make sure that it's, that it's ending. Actually, no, let me reverse that. You would go into that site application, modify it, and what that's going to do is it's going to save a new instance of that site application. It's going to keep everything that you had, and then it's going to create a new version, a revision, with all of the new information. So if you're starting a summer program, a summer feeding program at that site on June the 1st, then I think it's question 10 or 11 that asks you for the starting date for that site. So you would just put a new starting date in, and then when you go through the whole application, filling it out accordingly, TMAC is going to create a new revision. It's not going to get rid of what you had before. It's just going to create a new version, and you'll be able to go back and look at historical versions. There's a way to do that. So I don't know if that answered the question or not.
They sent clarification saying that they're going from a closed to an open site. So yeah, I think that covered it.
Yeah, that should do it, because you'll just create that revision and answer the questions accordingly for the new operation. And again, if that doesn't make a lot of sense, be sure to reach out to your consultant, whether it's me or whoever else it is across the state, and they can actually walk you through it in the moment where you're both looking at TMAC to help out.
So the next question says, for clarification, if only planning to feed kids in TDOE summer camps prior to June 30th, should we make our sites restricted open or closed enrolled?
I think the answer is closed enrolled, Randa, and I will defer to you on that. If they plan on not feeding the community at all and only want to feed those summer learning camp students, I think closed enrolled is the right answer.
Yeah, I would agree with that would be closed enrolled, since you're feeding only a select enrolled group of students in that program. And then, of course, you can only receive reimbursement for the kids that are enrolled in that program.
And also, because you're operating before June the 30th, you don't have to have any type of a waiver. You don't have to use the free or reduced applications. Like, they can use the enrollment. Like, we don't have to have all of the technical details like we would on July 1st. Is that correct, Randa?
That's correct. And yeah, I'm not gonna.
I don't want to complicate it. I don't want to make it muddy.
The next question is, open, restricted, open, and migrant sites must include the India statement when advertising? Is it the short statement or the full statement?
I think my gut tells me it depends on what type of advertisement we're talking about. If it's a radio spot, I think you can use the short statement. If it's something, some printed material, and I could be wrong, so anybody else on the call who is a state
I think
agency
it would
wants
have
to correct
to be
me.
the full statement
That's what I was
for a
thinking.
printed material, because it's like any other materials that we have, and since the advertisement is related to meal benefits, it's saying that all kids are eligible to get meals at no cost, you would refer back to those civil rights requirements. So stay tuned for Brooke's presentation in 2 weeks.
That's what I had in mind. That's exactly what I was thinking, was Brooke's got a presentation coming up on that. And I didn't want to overstep that.
And always the FNS 113 has a lot of good info, but that's a good question about the short or long statement. The next question says, any indication that the waivers will be extended into July, or is this the final decision? Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, to my understanding, this is the final decision, but you sure weigh in on that.
Yeah, so I would say this is the final decision. USDA does not have the authority to grant these additional waivers, and the latest that was included in budget legislation, and so the most recent funding package that was passed did not include an extended ability to waive these regulations. So I know that we have asked USDA what we are able to waive, but they essentially can't waive any requirements that are related to the meal pattern or anything that would result in a significant increase in cost to the federal government. So we're pretty limited as far as extensions of these. The next question is the short statement okay for social media posts? And I know that's something that we have talked about before, but I don't remember the answer for it. Do you, Frankie?
I do not. I do
Brooke,
not. We'll
do
see.
You have an answer?
I was going to say, we'll see if Brooke has an answer. Not put you on the spot, Brooke.
If so, you can put it in the chat to Frankie and I.
If not,
and
that's something that will be coming up on her civil rights presentation in a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
for sure.
We will do our best to get it for you.
Let's see.
That's all that I'm seeing right now.
I see one that says, do you have to have meal counts counted by kid? Oh, it just moved like a roster.
I missed that one. I think that's for the closed enrolled. And sorry, there was a comment to me that I'm responding to. As far as the roster goes for closed enrolled, you do not have to count each meal by each child. Think of it as like a CEP thing, like, because CEP, you can do like tick marks and that type of thing, because you don't have to know it based on that individual student's status, but you would need to keep in your records who was enrolled in those camps.
And then somebody asked if you were, go ahead.
Brooke said if you're promoting program eligibility, the full NDS must be listed and cannot be altered. That means the spacing cannot be reduced, paragraphs or sentences cannot be excluded, font size shall be no smaller than the text in the material. So I'm assuming that by that answer, she means that the full statement has to be on social media, question mark. Let's see. If you are only providing meals under closed enrolled for TDOE summer school, do you have to advertise summer meals? I think you need to clarify if you actually mean summer school or summer learning camps, because summer schools cannot be closed enrolled, but summer learning camps can be. And if it is a closed enrolled site, you do not advertise because only the kids enrolled in that site can get those meals. In the past, we included phone numbers of who to contact for summer feeding options on our May menus, along with the short NDS statement. Is this still okay? Lots of NDS questions.
I think for menus, regardless of if you've got the summer contact feeding information in there, I think if the menus are just menus, you don't have to put that on there. If it's just a menu, if it's just a piece of paper that says the date and what's being offered, you wouldn't have to put the NDS on there. And again, Brooke, you may chime in. I don't want to get into too much NDS stuff because Brooke's going to have a full training on it in 2 weeks, and she right now is the expert who has all the latest and greatest information. So I don't want to get too much in detail on NDS. However, if you're going to put anything on there that refers to the program, I think you have to put the full NDS on there. So, I mean, it's always a good idea to put the contact information and that type of stuff and get that out there. But if you're going to put anything about the program information, I think you have to use the full NDS. So I don't want to step too much on Brooke's toes because, like I said, she's got the most latest and greatest information that I don't even have. So I don't want to get too much into that with this.
Brooke says in the chat, you are correct.
Okay, good. I saw another one. Somebody mentioned somewhere in there about us contacting the legislators, and again, I don't want to. I don't remember the exact thing. Want to know if we can contact them about.
Frankie, I responded to that person individually that she could share that, since we're not really in a position to
right.
share.
That's what I was going to say. We're not really have the ability to do that, but yeah. Let's see. What else?
I'm not seeing any more at this point. I don't know if any have maybe went to you individually, Frankie, but I'm looking. I'm caught up on this side, except one just came through. Okay, it says confused. We are only feeding for TDOE summer learning, closed enrolled, so we're not required to advertise. That is correct. So you need to, sorry, Frankie, I'm just answering all
you
of these.
You are fine, go right ahead. You're fine.
So you need to think of it, if you're confused about the advertisements in terms of what those sites are intended for. So an open site or a restricted open site is open to the public, and you must feed all children under 18. So you need to advertise that that service is available. With a closed enrolled site, you cannot feed the public. You can only feed those who are enrolled at the program at that feeding site. So you wouldn't want or need or be required to advertise that, because no one from the outside would be eligible to get a meal since it is a closed enrolled site. So TDOE summer learning camps, closed enrolled, no advertisement. And it looks like we're caught up again on my side.
Yeah, I was just skimming through. I don't think there's anything that's come just to me. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for taking the time out to be a part of this training today. Again, I know it was a lot of information. Like Randa said earlier, there's a lot of moving parts. It can be difficult to kind of put it in your mind as to exactly which piece of this applies to you under which circumstance. So I implore you again, you're not in this alone. Reach out to your regional consultant and tell them the type of things you're thinking of or the situations that you're being asked to provide, and let them help guide you with these site applications and your preparation and your planning. You know, that's what we're here for. Of course, we'll send out the slide deck here as soon as we can with, you know, the survey link in it. Randall will take care of that, so be on the lookout for that. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have Brooke with a full-blown civil rights training. Sounds like it's going to be interesting and important, so I hope you can make time to log in for that training. I'm excited to hear it myself and see all the, you know, if there's any changes or what I didn't know, the state of the state with civil rights. So again, thanks a lot, and I appreciate you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frankie, and we will talk to y'all in 2 weeks.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.